Bienvenidos a El Cafecito del Día, brought to you by the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. Our conversations are inspired by the moments of togetherness that nuestra comunidad shares over un cafecito.
Bienvenidos, soy Carmen Rodriguez. On September 17, we celebrated Constitution Day, a day to reflect on the most important document in our country's history. The Constitution is more than words on paper. It is the foundation of our democracy and the framework that protects our rights. Yet too often, especially vulnerable communities, immigrant families, and workers face policies and practices that contradict its warranties. From anti-immigrant laws to Supreme Court decisions that permit profiling simple por hablar español, these actions threaten not only individuals but the very principles of justice and equality the Constitution stands for. Acompáñenos en este nuevo episodio del Cafecito del Día to explore with Cheryl Nero, consulting to the Task Force for the American Democracy, why understanding the Constitution is vital, how it impacts our daily lives, and why defending it is essential for protecting our democracy. Comenzamos. Welcome, Cheryl, to El Cafecito del Día. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here with you.
Let's start our conversation with something simple but necessary. Why, for every person living in the U.S., no matter their immigration status or their origin, and not just lawmakers or lawyers or politicians, do we need to understand what the Constitution says and how it protects all of us?
I'll start from the words of Benjamin Franklin, who said, "The Constitution had created a republic if we're able to keep it." And what the founders and the writers of the Constitution understood was that when our population is informed and understands their rights under the Constitution, we can take all the appropriate measures to ensure that our rights are protected. And if we don't understand what the protections are, we're more likely to lose them. So the Constitution is not perfect. As a matter of fact, the first words of the Constitution include the phrase, "in order to form a more perfect union." There are problems with the Constitution, and there always have been historically, but it is our civic mission and the mission of our government to work towards perfection, to use the processes that the document created in order to protect the wrongs as they emerge over time, which we have successfully done. Sometimes it can be a quick change. Most times it is a slow change. But our mission defined in this very important document that says, most importantly, that it applies to all people equally. That is the promise that we have to work hard to keep. We haven't kept it perfectly, but that is the goal. That is the mission that says we have to form a more perfect union.
How do the current anti-immigrant policies conflict with the protection warranty in the Constitution? And what does this mean for immigrant communities?
All of our immigrant policies and laws are currently being tested in a way that is unprecedented in American history. There have never been so many challenges to constitutional rights, such as being born in the United States, meaning that you are a citizen. Birthright citizenship. There are those right now who wish to challenge that. There are all sorts of measures that have been enacted over almost 250 years that have created processes. And let me just mention what I mean by processes. What the Constitution actually does is it outlines the ways that government must operate that ensure that the operation of government is fair to all people. And it does that by creating what we refer to as checks and balances. The president, the Congress, and the courts, the judiciary, all watch what each other does to make sure that no one branch of government takes power from the others. And that when they exercise power, those powers are articulated in the Constitution, and they are their powers to use. Right now, we have a situation where we are seeing our checks and balances not working the way they have always worked. And a lot of things that are going on in legislation and in the executive branch are being challenged in the courts. And the courts were never designed to be the only functioning branch of American government. So they're overwhelmed. And so our system is being tested in ways that it wasn't designed to be tested, and ways that we must right, we must correct, and we must all engage in understanding what these challenges are and take responsibility to do what we can as citizens to right the ship. So our immigration system is being very challenged, and the processes that our laws and our Constitution have established are not functioning the way they were designed to function. Immigration judges have been, in number, diminished. There have been a loss of judges at a time when numbers of immigration cases have exploded, and there's huge, and it's difficult to get appointments, and it's difficult to trust going to court right now. Our governmental operations, especially in immigration system, is just all gummed up and barely able to keep up with being able to process all of the cases that are emerging around the nation.
The Supreme Court ruled to allow immigration and federal officers to racial profile Latinos or people speaking Spanish, a las personas hablando español in LA, under suspicion that they may be illegals.
Yeah.
How does this decision violate the constitutional rights, and what does this set for discrimination?
Our system of prosecution, even in minor criminal matters, in going through stop signs, in failing to use your turn signal, all of those require the government to provide due process. And what that means is that if you are accused of doing something wrong, you automatically, under our system, have the right to defend yourself. And if you need a lawyer, to get one. Our system is designed for you to offer your defense and have a fair, neutral judge evaluate whether you have in fact violated any law or ordinance. And that applies to people walking down the street and looking different and speaking a different language. That applies to every person who is in this country while they're here. And yes, if you're a visitor on a visa, you have those rights because you're here. If you're even undocumented, you have rights to offer your defense. You could be waiting for hearings. You could be waiting for processes to be completed, which entitle you to be treated fairly under our laws. There is nothing in our legal system established by the Constitution that justifies anything but legal uses of our laws. And there isn't a test. There isn't a way to look. There isn't a color skin to have. There isn't a language to speak or a background to possess that gives anyone more rights than anyone else in this nation. And that is a core principle.
In what ways does the Constitution guarantee equal protection and due process for all people, regardless of their immigration status? And why is critical to remind people of this, especially when we are seeing detentions, arrests, and even deportations without due process?
As the ink was drying on the document, there were those in the room signing the Constitution that said, but we need to add important things about what the government cannot do to people. And so shortly after they signed the Constitution on September 1787, they knew that they had to get to work to write a statement of all of the rights that all of the citizens and all of the people in America were entitled to. And one of them was that the ultimate American unifying law, we are all equal under the law in this country. And every time the United States fails to recognize that, there is a constitutional violation of our founding principles. Let me give you a practical example of what I'm talking about. In this country, our Constitution and the rule of law impacts everything we do every day. We know we can safely navigate our streets because everybody has an equal responsibility to obey the traffic laws. Moreover, you can open your wallet and you can take out dollars and you can pay with that currency. And of course, we all can use credit cards, we all can use cash. We can walk into the store and know that we won't be turned away because we have the proper currency. And if you're going into an office, you know that you should have equal opportunities to advance in that office setting. Why? Because it's un-American, unconstitutional to use bias and discrimination to prevent people from being able to advance their careers. So in our system, you can look at 100 different ways. Can you go to a comedian's show where that comedian can tell jokes about anything he or she wants? Yes. Why? Because there is freedom of speech in this nation. Can you go down to the local corner and say, don't close this road, we need this road, and have a sign to protest the closing of a road that you need? Yes. Because we have, in fact, it's a duty for citizens to stand up and voice their concerns to our elected officials. Those are rights, and they are enshrined in our Constitution, and it is what truly unites us as Americans. That is unique to our nation to some degree. There are other democracies, but that's the way ours works, and it has been a beacon in the world for a good long time.
What union member and communities can do to use the Constitution as a tool to empower themselves to push back against policies that undermine the Constitution itself, that undermines our rights and our democracy? And what can we do as individuals to demand and ensure the protection of our Constitution and the rights it guarantees?
Before there were unions, children could work in dangerous factories. Before there were unions, there weren't standardized wages. There weren't health programs. The safety rules that we just talked about. So organizing in unions is one of the most important ways that workers in America can and do strengthen their own voice. Because when one worker says, this doesn't seem fair or right, it has an impact. But when thousands of workers say this isn't fair, it amplifies the importance and the urgency of that message. So what our system has always responded to, positively or negatively, is when people stand together and they unite around a shared cause. And advancements in everyday life in this country have been made by citizen groups getting together and standing together to make a change to the law, to make sure that the laws are being used fairly, to create protections that should be in place that aren't, to share information, to share knowledge, to share understanding what your rights are. Unions in America have not only improved the lives of workers, but they've educated workers as to how to make their voices heard and how to impact change and how to protect each other.
What can organizations like BlackLA do to ensure that our Latino workers community and our families are aware of our constitutional rights?
The most important thing is to obtain information that is accurate and credible. There are, for example, online courses offered for free to teach basic American rights to anybody who wants to learn about it. And I think the most important thing right now is to realize that the understanding of the rights established under the Constitution are everyday rights and that everyone is entitled to them. And so the most important way you protect yourself, your family, your friends, your community is, first of all, knowledge. Second of all, sharing the knowledge. I remember so long ago, there was a commercial for some shampoo, and the commercial said, I told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. And of course, everybody fell in love with the shampoo. But actually, that's what we have to do with our constitutional rights. Tell your family, tell your children, tell your neighbors, tell your friends. You have a right to use that phone camera to videotape what's going on in our communities right now. You have a right to organize. You have a right to stand together, to speak out, to share your understandings of all of these protections with everyone you know. And I think it is a time to come together. The fact that this is the way our nation has always healed itself. Whenever it had ruptures, separations, divisions, problems, and challenges, we have always looked to the Constitution for the path to the solution. And we will continue to do that when more of us understand the Constitution, use the constitutional protection in appropriate ways, and share everything we are doing and that we know with all of our friends and families and community members across the nation. And of course, those of us who are entitled to vote need to do that and need to learn about the candidates and what they hope to accomplish when they run for office, and make sure that it aligns with their understanding of what our rights are.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for being with us in este Cafecito del Día. Thank you for all the information you share with us in this episode.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to have had the opportunity to talk with you.
We call on unions, members, and allies to take action, defend our Constitution by helping our communities understand it, organize union meetings dedicated to explain the Constitution and walking through its most important protections, hand out copies of the Constitution, both in English y en español, because having it in our hands, being able to read it, makes you feel safe and empowered. As we've heard today, the Constitution is not an abstract concept locked away in history. It is a living promise meant to safeguard freedom and equality para todo el pueblo. But those promises are only real if we, the people, el pueblo, defend them. Anti-immigrant policies, racial profiling, and attacks on civil rights are not just political issues. They are violations of the very foundation that holds the country together. When we read the most essential part of the Constitution, we see that this document was written to guarantee our rights and freedom. By walking through it together in our communities, whether in union halls, schools, or neighborhood meetings, we make the Constitution real and accessible para todos. We must live the protections of our Constitution, teach and defend it, so that democracy works for every person in our country. Nos escuchamos en el próximo Cafecito del Día.
El Cafecito del Día is part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network